All right. What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Hey, we're getting pegged on Let Them Eat Toast here today. We've got our Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan,
Wow.
one of my favorite politicians in the state for sure. We're a little disappointed she's not currently our governor, for reasons we think you probably all agree with, but she is also now moving on to potentially be a U.S. Senator here for our great state, so we'll let her talk about that. But thank you so much for being here today, Peg.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is great.
Yeah, and I do want to
Uh,
apologize right up front. Jordan did not run the pegging joke past me. I think he wanted to see my reaction too. So,
I'd like to
mhm.
tell you that's the first time I've ever heard that joke. It is.
uh,
It is.
people
I'm
people
glad
can
I
be
you
do
cruel.
think
so we're good. Yeah.
I did a political figure episode on you like a year ago, and I'm pretty sure I used that joke in that video too. So I'm recycling.
You
I'm
did, and
being.
that is why someone sent it to me. They're like,
Oh
"Did you see this?
no,
Amazing." Yeah. So I
I
appreciate
love
it,
that
and I
so
should have
much.
known it was coming, right? I can't believe I was surprised.
Yeah, yeah,
true,
yeah.
true. But now you got to come up with new material, Jordan, next time.
I do. I've used it twice now. I could maybe squeeze a third, but then I'm gonna run out of run out of leash on that
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I've had the privilege of meeting you a few times, and you've just been amazing every time. I'm a little disappointed you're not in the bright. I just love all the bright stuff you always wear, and the fishbone earrings, or all the big. You guys, if you have not seen Peggy's outfits, they are the best in politics. I'm pretty sure.
Well, hold on,
Um.
hold on, hold
Oh.
on. Let
Oh.
me
Oh. What do we got? What do we
as
got?
you can see behind me, right, there are many earrings available here. So let me
Oh,
I don't
nice. We're getting the
I don't want to
upgrade.
disappoint you. Let's see, what do we got? We got these guys right here. We'll throw them
Oh,
on.
dang.
How's that? A little blingy,
Much better.
Yeah,
right?
Much
for
Okay.
better.
sure.
All right.
All
Those
right.
also look.
We yep,
They also look kind of heavy.
Oh,
It's
they're all
got to
right.
be. Yeah. All right.
I
yeah.
got
Yeah.
it.
I feel like, if you started whipping your head back and forth, you could really use them as a defensive mechanism.
100%. And like, if you
Hmm.
can't slam it in the car door, I don't want it, right? Like, you know.
That never happened to you, for sure, obviously.
But since we're sitting here, I'm in my office and I have a
Hmm.
whole bunch of earrings available, but this is one of my favorite pairs. I'm going to tell you a little something about me. My favorite movie of all time is Jim Henson's Labyrinth.
Mm.
Oh, with
So
Steve Bowie?
with David Bowie,
David Bowie, yeah.
Steve Bowie. Did you just say
yep, our
Steve Bowie?
beaded. All
I
right,
love it. I
these
love it.
guys. Yep. So it's just a
My
little.
wife, my
Mhm.
wife made me watch that movie for the first time last year, and let's just say, without the nostalgia, it does not hold up. So I sorry to disagree with you there. So
Oh,
So
come on, Taylor. You just gotta appreciate it for what it is. Um.
it's I tried.
All right. So, I've again had the privilege of interacting with you a few times now, and I'm ecstatic that you're on here. And I was so honored to be able to yesterday for everybody in the live, and last week for when this actually gets posted. We were at the Good Trouble protest, Good Trouble Lives On protest, and I sort of got to open for Peggy with my speech there, and she just comes and shows me I'm up there reading off a phone, stumbling over my words and everything, and then Peggy just comes up here like falling asleep on the railing before we get up there, and then standing up there out of nowhere. I don't know. She's got it all memorized, fluid as hell, like she's reading off a teleprompter, and yeah, it's a little self conscious after that. But no, it was an incredible speech that you had there.
well, thank you.
Um,
But also you did an incredible job. And first of all, like let's be clear, you were wearing a shirt either like similar vibes. Everybody could see
mhm,
you, right? Which
mhm.
matters. And I feel like the things that you were speaking to in particular, I feel like sometimes we just so us and them in so many of
Mhm,
our conversations, like folks who live in greater Minnesota right? Folks who are in the metro, folks who are this, folks who are that. And like, you just take all that out of the way, right? And like, we are clearly all in this together. And it literally, something that I talk about a lot is even if we don't agree on everything, the thing that we can agree on in this moment in particular is that it is literally all of us versus extremist billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that came through like loud and clear in what you were talking about at the rally. And it's super powerful. And I'm glad that you named it because we need to be leaning in harder in those spaces.
Well, I
Well, the labor
appreciate that.
movement makes that really easy on us. We talk about the
Mm-hmm.
history of the labor movement here all the time, and the victories and the fights that have been won over the history of America, and so they set the stage for us to expand upon that. So they definitely left us with a great legacy.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that's right. And we should lean on it. Like, my mom was a phlebotomist. She went back to school when I was little and got her certificate in phlebotomy. So she always used to joke that she's a professional vampire. But
Can you, for the audience, tell us what phlebotomy is?
sure,
Definitely not for
she
myself. I totally know what it is,
absolutely,
but
not for you, of course.
uh-huh.
So she drew people's blood.
Okay.
And yes, and so she would often talk about how she worked in a whole bunch of different healthcare settings, but really would lament the fact that every place that she worked, she didn't have a union, and how much that impacted the kind of wages that she was bringing in, the kind of scheduling, as you can imagine, right, in a healthcare system. But then she also was like, and remember though, like where we come from. My great grandfather Edmund was left on the front lawn with both of his legs broken because he was trying to organize sewer workers in the city of Minneapolis. And so, my mom was always like, that is in us, that is in your blood. Don't forget where you come from, and that like you take big risks to make sure, right, that people have rights. And I think there are so many lessons from the labor movement and from folks who've come before, from John Lewis, right, that we can be
Mhm.
leaning on in this moment.
No, I agree, and I was again. It's a huge honor to have you compliment my speech and my message there like that. I was really worried because I came in with the Blair Mountain thing, and I'm like, that's not really John Lewis related, and I was trying to tie it all together, but it gets a little awkward being a very very white man getting too much in the weeds on like the civil rights stuff and the speaking on behalf of that. So I hope I did okay on that. But
You
I
did
it was
great.
a
We need allies everywhere, man.
no, it was a huge honor being up there on the same stage as you. Um and I guess before kind of we get into what you're doing right now in politics and everything, I want to know why. And I mean I kind of know why, but I want the audience to know why you do this, why you're passionate about the activism and the politics that you're in.
Sure. Well, I grew up thinking I was going to be a early childhood special education teacher. That was my path. That, I majored in child development and American Indian Studies, and I was like, and take a year off and then go back and get my teaching degree. And my senior year of college, I worked for Senator Paul Wellstone, and I was like, oh, this, right, like organizing and electoral politics is a tool in our toolbox to get the kind of change that we need in our communities, and you can be right up all in it and contribute thoughts and ideas to what you think should happen. And that for me was really exciting, and at that time, like, I did not think that that meant run for political office, but I was really drawn to that piece of it. Um, and the reason I decided to run is because, man, um, we do not have enough people in Washington, D.C. who understand what it's like to think that the bottom could fall out at any moment, and who truly understand what it's like to struggle. Because if we did, I don't think this, big bullshit bill, right, that just was signed into law, right, would have gotten across the finish line. I grew up in the community of St. Louis Park, where I still live with my family. And my mom moved us here when I was just a baby using a Section 8 housing voucher. That's how we had a safe place to live. The child care assistance program allowed her to go back to school, right, and get her certificate in phlebotomy to help lift our family, right, towards the middle class. I wouldn't say into. But SNAP is what kept food on the table for us. And, I didn't know a seed bag from a feed bag coming up in St. Louis Park. It's not like we're like a bastion of agriculture here. Uh, but I sure do now. And what I also know is that it was farmers who kept me fed, both in right growing the food, but also in advocating on behalf of families like mine. I was that kid with a different colored lunch ticket who relied on free and reduced price lunch, and I am here alive as someone who relied on Medicaid or medical assistance here in Minnesota. And I was a kid with really, really bad asthma. There were times in elementary school when I was like in the hospital more than I was out. Um, those medical bills would have completely crushed my family. And so, that lived experience feels like something we need right now. And I've spent my entire career working on family economic security. And I would say, like, over time, my occupation has changed, right? If I'm working in direct service at a nonprofit or the executive director of Children's Defense Fund or serving in the House or being lieutenant governor or even being like Siobhan's mom, right? Like, my vocation has always been the same, that people are seen, heard, valued, protected, and believed, and that we are laser focused on children and families. So that's like where I come from, and why I decided to do this, because we need more folks who understand what real people are going through in this moment. And I think this foolishness that would be that's happening right now, that we certainly would have a lot less of it.
I don't. I guess so. And you're also indigenous, and
Mm-hmm.
so how much did that play into your upbringing with those situations? Obviously, we really undervalue our indigenous people in this country, and I've loved how much more of a focus our state in particular, I think a lot with your leadership, has been putting on that. But that has to be a very different lived experience than anything that we've had coming up. Being the pasty mayo colored people we are.
Well, I would say this. It's not like it is not a hat that I can take on and off, or a role, right? That I can switch on and off. I am an Anishinaabe at all times. I'm an Ojibwe woman at all times. But I also, right, know who I am and where I come from. Like, my mom was always like, "Listen, your great grandmother Katie came over on the boat when she was 15 from Ireland. You are, Irish and Ojibwe, and that's part of your identity." And she made sure that I was connected. I'm Native on my dad's side, and you know, my dad and I didn't grow up with him. I was really fortunate that when he got healthier, is what I will say, and when he got sober, that's when we were able to be part of each other's lives. And I was really fortunate. But growing up, my mom kept me connected to my aunties and my cousins, and did the best she could. And I would say there are still people who do not know that Native Americans exist, like, at all, in a contemporary context, right? Even when I was in the legislature, I remember I gave my retirement speech, and one of my colleagues came up to me and he was like, "Flanagan, I had no idea you were Native American." And I was like, and he said, "I thought you were all dead." And I was like,
What?
yeah, it was an interesting moment, and I used that in the most Minnesotan way possible. And I didn't know what to do other than to be like, "Surprise," right? like we're still here. And I think the work that we've been able to do, Governor Walz and I, were pretty intentional when we decided to do this thing together, that we were going to meet with all 11 Native nations that share their geography with Minnesota. On the campaign trail before we came into office, we continued those relationships. And I think in many ways we're just doing what the state of Minnesota should have been doing for the
Mhm.
last 160 so years. Tribes are incredibly important to Minnesota's economy, for the enterprises that they operate, for the health insurance that they provide, for the jobs in greater Minnesota in particular. And
Mhm.
like we have to talk about this in a way where we're like really clear that in many ways we're partners. It's government to government, but we are partners. And that's been something that's been important to me, but also important to the governor. So I'm not running for the Senate to make history. I'm running to make a difference, but I think it certainly is about time that there's a Native
Mhm.
American woman who is serving in the United States Senate.
Has there ever been any Native American who's served in Senate?
Yes, so there have been Native American men. Ben Nighthorse Campbell was, I think, the first Native man from Colorado. Mark Wayne Mullen is also Native from Oklahoma, but there's never been a Native American woman before. And so we've had, Native women, the first two elected to Congress, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland, who then became Secretary of the Interior, but not on the Senate side. And so I think, especially when the federal government makes so many decisions that directly impact tribal communities, it's important that we have, that voice at the table. And I just argue that I think democracy works best when it accurately reflects the people that it seeks to represent, right? That people feel a stake in it. They feel, that they're being heard, that we can build trust there a bit more. And I think that matters.
For sure.
I
And not only that, but another woman in the Senate. I mean, 25% of the Senate or being held seats held by women is a disaster. I mean, if you want
Mhm.
representation, like, you should be aiming for it close to 50-50 as you can, ideally, right? And
Mhm.
including people from all walks of you know our country, and that makes the strongest unit. So
That's right. And it's, um, I think it's something people get and they understand. Uh, and I hope that we get to the point where it is just normal, right? It's just like how it is. And like, so I think
Mhm.
like my daughter, when I became the lieutenant governor, she like keeps me humble. She's like, Mommy, I don't understand what the big deal is. She's like, you work in the same building, you just have a different job. Right? Or that for her, Auntie Deb is the Secretary of the Interior. Auntie Sharice was in Congress, right? Auntie Jamie was the, chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Minnesota State House. Like she just has seen Native women lead and serve at all
Mhm.
different levels in a way that like I could have never conceptualized or
Right.
imagined when I was coming up. So
You
we've
need
got
to
a
bring her
real
around some trailer parks or something. Start getting those expectations back
that's
down. Like she's just gonna have like.
I know, right? And she just like walks, but it's amazing, like starting from there, walking
Mhm.
into a room and just feeling like you deserve to be there.
Mhm.
I didn't always have that growing up, and
Yeah.
it feels different. And I think there's an opportunity, especially for young people and people of her generation, who are just like, why was it ever like that? Why
Mhm.
there, and so that gives me a lot of hope for what's possible.
That's. I mean, I don't think that there's many more people in politics that show what hope can be. I mean, obviously, from where you came to where you are now, and hopefully where you're going, really shows that while the American dream is feels like it's crumbling all around us, and in many ways it is, it's still that glimmer is still there and can still be achieved with the right leadership. And obviously your background seems to be what most of your platforms are based off of, and so I want to talk about that a little bit, especially going into the Senate campaign. First and foremost, money in politics. Are you taking any PAC money?
I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. And I made that decision, especially right now, because I think the way people assume Washington works, that
Mm-hmm.
it's pay to play, I think it is working exactly like that now
Mm-hmm.
more than ever before. And it's not just on the Republican side of the aisle. I think you see it in the Democratic Party too. And for me, I want it to be like really clear that I am beholden to donors in Minnesota, not to big companies who expect me to vote a particular way because they've written, a max out check
Hmm.
to my campaign. And so that's been important. I think big corporations have lots of representation in Washington, and that it is regular folks who are the ones who need it. And we've been able to build out. I hadn't run for the United States Senate before, and so we started from scratch. And in this last quarter, we're able to report we hit our goal of raising almost $1 million. And that was from over 20,000 individual donors. The average donation that we received was $30. And 94% of our contributions have come from folks that have been under $100. So, for me, that means that real folks are the ones who are powering this campaign, and that when we get contributions from all 87 counties in Minnesota, that tells me that we're onto something. And it's folks who continue to say like, "Oh, I'll give $5 here and $5 there," that we only have potential to grow, and that nationally, I think our race is gaining attention, and I think that matters.
For sure, and
I
I think
know.
that should be the
Yeah.
standard for Democratic candidates moving forward is no corporate PAC money. I mean, if you want to be even considered to be a mildly progressive candidate or just not a bot candidate, I mean that should be the standard across the nation.
I totally
Hmm.
agree. And I think ultimately, we need to get money out of politics overall. But until that, like there
Hmm.
are ways that we can model, how we should be doing this.
For sure.
So on getting money out of politics, if you are fortunate enough to end up in the Senate, and we're fortunate enough to have you there, what would be the policies that you would advocate for, you would write to get money out of politics? Because this is, in a way, sort of enshrined in the Constitution, at least according to the Supreme Court and their really poor reading skills. So,
They've been wrong
how
before.
how would you go about fixing that?
Well, I think one that we need to like change, right? What you were referring to, that corporations are considered people. That feels bad, right? Like that's something that we need to change.
Seems weird.
Citizens United, absolutely. And I think, End Citizens United is an organization that I think is doing incredible work, and we should follow their blueprint for how, like their expectations, right? Which again is getting that big money out of politics, the pay to play, and doing as much as we can to ensure that corporations are not people, that we are passing those laws, and that real folks feel empowered. Public financing is another thing that we can look at, to ensure that people are elected based on their ability to connect with folks, to campaign, and the how people are excited about their experience and ideas, and that I think is something that we need to really talk about. And again, right now, like there are entire lobbying firms who are working with corporations to say, here's how you keep your head down and stay out of the sight lines of Donald Trump, because he has so much power in this moment. And like that shouldn't be happening. So
Hmm.
I am ready to dig in, and one of the first ways that we could do that is simply just by modeling that I don't want to take corporate PAC money.
That's great. And we're actually going to get to that here in a little bit. But before we get to that, I still want to kind of hit your platforms, because the other big one that I know you've been talking about some is healthcare. And
Yeah.
obviously, like with this, horrible bill that they keep telling us is beautiful being passed, it is stripping millions of Americans of their access to healthcare. And what's worse is that rural hospitals, hospitals where I live,
Yeah.
out here, people that I know are going to be affected by this, because many of these hospitals are, they rely on that Medicaid money to function at all, to keep their doors open. And it's not just affecting, like, I think a lot of people, especially insulated by the idea that they live in more metro, more populated places, are not going to be as affected by this. But my wife's brother-in-law, would that be a brother-in-law to me? I have no idea how that works out, but sure, whatever. He's a nurse over in St. Cloud at a very large hospital, and he was talking about a number of services they are already planning on putting together models for cutting because of these Medicaid cuts and these budget cuts. This is a major hospital, and these are just going to be services they no longer offer because the particular clientele that need these services, or they're not high paying enough services to just go completely on a privatized model for. This is gonna hit everybody everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're in a major city or not. But obviously it's gonna hit us worse out here in rural America. So healthcare, I know, has been one of your big things even before this came along, and ideally we'd like to be making steps towards not the worst healthcare system on the entire planet, but we're
Or at
going the
least for your
opposite direction
dollar.
right now. Yeah, and playing damage control. So what's your policies there? What's your plans there? What do you want to talk about there?
Sure. Well, I think what you laid out is incredibly real. There are so many folks I think who are like, "Oh, well, I don't rely on Medicaid for my health care or medical assistance, as we call it here in Minnesota. So like I don't have anything to worry about." The reality is we are all impacted by it. So, for example, I was up in East Grand Forks holding what we're calling kitchen table conversations, which is a little less town hall, a little more community meeting. In Minnesota, we've held many of them across the state. And we are in East Grand Forks in the VFW, which was like one of the rowdiest kitchen table conversations we've had, but it was great. And
Yeah.
the thing that came up here was that there's one nursing home in the community,
Mm-hmm.
and that they rely on Medicaid, especially for folks who, right, need long-term care and nursing home care. Not only are there people who live there who get their care who will literally have nowhere else to go and have no one else to care for them, there is the workforce there, right? These are reliable jobs in the community, but also the local economy and the small businesses that provide goods and services for this nursing home. So has a cascading effect, right? Or for healthcare systems, where a significant chunk of the people who receive services there also, right, rely on Medicaid for their
Mm-hmm.
health insurance. In Minnesota, 250,000 people are at risk for losing their health. That's real. That's real money. Those are real numbers. But it, again, is the cascading effect when it means costs will go up for everybody, access will go down for everybody. And like, that's how we have to talk about it. Right? Think about, rural communities. We're already in a crisis, especially if you are a pregnant woman or someone who needs, right, maternal care. You got to make sure that you're going to have your baby on time without any complications. If you have some place to get to, this is going to make that access and put more women and mothers at risk, more babies at risk, um, because of the lack of access to care. So I think Minnesotans and I think people across this country are smart enough to figure this out and be able to have these conversations about, what this means. So one, we have to restore these cuts. But two, um, we have to make it be easy for folks to access the care that they need. And so part of, the big bad bill is that they're, like there's more paperwork or there's work requirements or this, that, or the other thing. Listen, if I had to like essentially file my taxes every month, I'm sure there would be some point when I would screw up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is like
I'm
that's
pretty sure I screw it up every year, honestly. I just don't tell the IRS, but I'm not sure I've ever done them correctly, so.
right. Like that's the trick, right? We are going to make it so hard for you to get this care that you lose it. And then what happens? You get sick, you have some type of chronic issue, and then you go to the emergency room. And then they have to provide care for you because they are required to do so. It is like catastrophic. And then what happens there is that costs go up for everybody if you can't afford to pay your bill. So it is so short sighted. And so we've got to restore these cuts. But the other thing that I would say is like for too long, especially around issues of healthcare, Democrats sort of nibble around the edges. And I think we have an opportunity to have a bigger vision here. Um, you know, Congress negotiated the price of like lowering the price of 10 prescription drugs for folks on Medicare. I think that's really good. Like we should cheer that on. And I think American people are ready to say like
golf clap. Golf
that's
clap
right.
there.
Yeah.
The
Cool.
fingertips
Yay.
even,
10
yeah.
of them. Yeah.
Right. And of course, if you are on one of those 10 drugs, like that's huge. But my question, right, is like, why not all of them? We like
Can we look up the drugs because I feel like they're probably like boner pills and hair loss pills, right? Like
No, I think one of them was insulin, though. I think, right?
yeah,
inhalers.
being
right?
a smart
Like,
ass, it just
for
tends
sure.
to be the things that we get focused on
Right.
here
Okay.
in healthcare.
But and oftentimes things, right, that may benefit men, like there is ease of access to those for a reason when 25%, right, of people who are serving in Congress are women, right? Like it all that all makes sense. But there's and then I would say like for folks on Medicare, right now, doesn't cover hearing, vision, or dental. You need all of those things in order to be healthy, right? So it's and I think the thing that really like makes me more upset than anything else is this idea of pre-authorization, that there is some person who sits behind a desk who may or may not be a physician and who may or may not be a physician who is qualified, right, to make a decision regarding this particular area of care. It could also be AI, a robot, right, or a particular algorithm that decides whether or not you get the life-saving care and treatment that your doctor has prescribed. It is completely outrageous and should piss everybody off. And I'm sure most of us have someone in our life who has had to go head to head with these health plans to simply say, please help me stay alive. We got to get rid of that. It's ridiculous. And so those are the things I think, one, restoring these cuts, ease of access, and then like, let's actually make sure people can get the care they need with cheaper drugs and with your doctor actually making the decisions for what it is that you want, and not some dude behind a desk or a robot.
Yeah, well, I mean, considering that medical bankruptcy consists of 2/3 of bankruptcies in the United States, and with this bill, do you feel like this is an opportunity for Democrats to really make a push for a Medicare for all or universal healthcare system? Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure we're all tired of giving profits to a middleman, healthcare insurance provider that, like you said, has if we're lucky, a person behind a desk saying no, if not a formula or AI that's been trained to automatically default to a no just so that they can make a few extra dollars.
I mean, I think people are clearly hungry for change. They are primed and they are ready to have a system that works for them, that is not determined what kind of, identity you have, what kind of car you drive, your zip code, your ability to pay, whether or not you can hire lawyers to go head to head, right, with your health plan. Yeah, I think folks are ready for a change. There are certainly, like, I'm a policy nerd. And so, like, there are, like, really in the weed details of, like, how we make that transition that I care about. But ultimately, like, yeah, folks are ready for something where they can simply get the care that they need, right? And it's not going to throw them into bankruptcy and they don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and be this thing that, like, people are just terrified about and have anxiety about all of the time, or folks stay in positions or in jobs that they hate that are impacting their physical health or mental health because I got to keep this care for myself or for my family. We can do so much better, and I think American people expect us, right, to be fighting for those things.
Absolutely. I just got the 10-minute warning. Your buddies or your secretary, their assistant's keeping us on task here, so I might have to skip over a few of the.
I'm like, let's go. What
Yeah,
else?
I know. See,
Yeah.
can we tell her, just add another 10, 15 on here? Um, so I was gonna skip over a little bit. I'm gonna try to kind of combine a few questions here, and I'll let you lead how long that takes. Because some of the things that I noticed in your speech and kind of what you've been saying here is people over party, and we've had a lot of criticisms about the Democratic Party and how we don't really feel like they are, standing up to maybe the administration the way that we'd like. That they are not doing the effort, putting in the effort of fighting the battles that even if you can't win, you still need to go out there and fight. And I think that this is something that the Republican Party has done really well for a really long time. They're just going to go out there and cause a fuss and make a scene, and whether they get what they want or not, they're making problems, and that eventually makes ground up. They take an inch here and an inch there, and over the past 40, 50 years, that's gotten us to where we are. And Democrats are just like, I'm going to write another strongly worded letter that you should maybe not do that. And then on top of that, we're seeing every time voters kind of put out that mandate, so to speak, of we're looking for that change that we were just talking about with like Zoran winning the primary out here, and then Andrew Cuomo still going out, and Democrats still kind of shunning the more progressive change and everything like that. And it seems like you have the fire to kind of go against both our party that's not willing to go with the way that the people need it to go, as well as against the Republican Party, and so that may be an obstacle for you in running. And I'm just going to throw out all the three so you can kind of answer them.
Yeah.
Tying that into occasionally there's criticisms of perhaps you may be too progressive to win in Greater Minnesota. I think that that's ridiculous. Granted, I'm very, very biased on that one.
Maybe,
But kind of what you
maybe.
would think about that, in addition to obviously the Democratic Party kind of resisting progressiveness where when we really need it. And then I think just visibility. One of I think the biggest obstacles that maybe you'd have obviously running in Minnesota with a large rural area is visibility in rural Minnesota. It's been we don't see a lot of DFLers out here that aren't local DFLers. If you're not running for our congressional district specifically, or a local DFLer, we don't get to see a lot of you guys. And I understand, obviously, with scheduling and stuff, you've got a lot to do. But now running it as a senatorial candidate, you have a little bit more ability to be out here. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for people in greater Minnesota to feel represented by, the farmers and laborers putting the F and the L back in the DFL. And so how would you overcome that obstacle of a lot of people out here feel kind of ostracized or forgotten by the big city DFLers and that stuff, and then obviously the progressive stuff that we were talking about earlier, because I see those kind of as your obstacles towards um your Senate campaign here.
Well, I appreciate that. A couple of things. Like one, we've been having these kitchen table conversations across the state of Minnesota. And for me, like I am most comfortable when there's flip chart paper on the walls and markers and post-it notes. And so they've really been facilitated conversations, and we've had them in red congressional districts and in greater
I'm
Minnesota.
happy to organize one here too if you
I'm
want.
ready.
So
And it is, and I think it's super fun. So just to be clear, like, we've been to Bemidji, Brainerd, Cannon Falls, Woodlake, Hibbing. We did one in the basement of the library in Hibbing next to the Bob Dylan exhibit, right? And it was, it's been important for me, East Grand Forks, to spend time there and to hear people directly. And of course, folks who've come to these events, there's like a lot of Democrats, a lot of DFLers, but there's then also a lot of people who are like, I've never been to anything like this in my life. I don't consider myself a member of any party, but I'm super freaked out. Right. And then we've
it's not
had
like we're gonna find Pete Stauber to have a town hall with.
well,
So
exactly. I mean, and then we have had Republicans, a handful of Republicans who have shown up. I had a former Republican state senator come to one of our events, and they were like, I bet you're surprised to see me here. And I was like, well, a little bit. But they said, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just glad that you're here to listen. And I'm like, yeah, you bet. And like I said, we are not going to agree on everything. But what we can agree on is that like most folks, the overwhelming majority, and like Jordan, like what you said yesterday, 99% of us are getting completely screwed. Like all people want, whether or not you live in rural community, you live in the exurbs or the suburbs or the core of the city, is to just live a good life. I want to be able to take care of myself, to take care of my family, to maybe take a vacation every once in a while, right? And enjoy this place that we live called Minnesota. And that's not asking too much. And so those are the places where we start. And I think there's like ideas of like what progressivism means. But I think coming back to the root, it's progress. And
Mhm.
right now, people do not feel like we are making progress. In fact, folks are like, I cannot catch up, I cannot keep up. And people are like really afraid. So I'm going to lean in hard there on family economic security, making sure that you can afford your life, that you don't go into bankruptcy because of your health care, that you can keep food on the table, right? And that you can just live a good life. And that's where we're going to start. And so if people disagree with me on other stuff, like we can have those conversations, but let's start there. And, spending time in rural communities, that's been, sometimes I think like the governor gets a little bit more, right, like attention when he and like, I get it. Like I'm second in command. That's how this works. But I've spent an incredible amount of time, right, in greater Minnesota and, visiting farms, visiting community and technical colleges, literally meeting with young people in communities who want to just like talk about like mental health, right? And how they just don't have resources to be able to get the kind of support they need in their community. This is work that I have done as lieutenant governor and should be, my hope is, the expectation would be as we are doing this campaign work. One of the reasons I started so early and was really clear that I was ready to move on to this next piece here in the segment is that we've done good work here in Minnesota. Continue that work right in Washington, but also I've seen it. I'm a recovering school board member, right? I've been a member of the legislative branch in the state house and then in the executive branch, right? As lieutenant governor, having experience across all forms of government, the federal government impacts the way that we're able to do our work and how we can show up for folks in rural communities. And so that is what I would say. And as I grew up in St. Louis Park, but I also have deep roots in greater Minnesota, one right on White Earth, but also, my kiddo, her grandparents, and her dad grew up in New Ulm. Like my story is a Minnesota story. And I think for so many of us, maybe where we live now versus our roots, but ultimately what I want is for anybody in this state, a young person who's growing up in a rural community, to be able to stay there if that is what they want to do, because they have opportunities to get a good job, right? To be able to have healthcare that they can afford that keeps them healthy. And that ultimately there are opportunities that exist for people all across the state of Minnesota. And that is the lens that I am going to use, right, as I am, approaching this campaign and this work. And I would just like invite, your viewers to say, your viewers and listeners, you want to invite me in? I'm down, right? Like I am ready, right, to meet folks where they are. Because too often we expect people to come to us as candidates and campaigns. Like I'd rather meet people where they are, where they feel the most comfortable, where they are ready and willing to tell you what they think. And that has been the greatest gift of my life, has been being able to do this work as LG. And my daughter says my mom's job is to go on field trips and help people. And ultimately, like, that's it. I get to visit
That's
with people, I get to learn about them, and then I get to implement, those changes that people see that they, that, and to advocate on their behalf. And I've been proud of the work in particular that I've been able to do in partnership with farmers. Um, I didn't grow up that way, but I have a very clear understanding that I exist because of farmers and the work that they did for me. And, got an award from the Minnesota Farmers Union for a lot of that work and have thrown down for dairy farmers um, and emerging farmers and young people who want to like stay on the farm and they want to be able to afford it. That's also part of my work and the story that I need to make sure that people across Minnesota hear, and that means spending time on the road.
That it's first of all very adorable that that's how your daughter describes it, and I love that so much. And I think that that's an excellent answer, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you out here. I'm gonna super piss Grace off with one final question, but I think it's an important one. And then thank you so much for being here. But securing the nomination, Minnesota DFL does not normally do primaries. We caucus, and I know there's some pluses and minuses to this. Obviously, it kind of allows for a smoother process where we don't get the infighting and mudslinging against our own candidates. But obviously, voters are a bit more disconnected from the candidate selection process, which can be a bit frustrating for voters. And it can be frustrating, because sometimes you end up with a candidate you don't like, or you don't know how to support the candidate you do like. So, in this kind of situation, you're obviously going to be going through that process. How can people support you to help you with that? That'll be my last question, Grace, I promise, and then we can move on. But I just want people to know how they can support you and help you to get the nomination, or if it's not you and they want to support somebody else to get the nomination, I guess they could do that too, I suppose. But we need to have them have that information.
Absolutely. So there's a process that we go through for the DFL endorsing convention. It starts at our caucus process in February of next year. You go to your caucus, you meet with your neighbors, you talk about the things that you care about. You sign up to go to your local unit convention or your Senate district convention. And then ultimately, we want to encourage people to get to that DFL convention in May or June. And we will support people through that entire process, right? We do a lot of work where we encourage people to go into an auditorium or a windowless room with people they don't know and spend an entire beautiful Saturday there, right? But like, it's part of our democracy. What I would say is everything that we are doing right now, the organizing work that we are doing right now, the kitchen table conversations, the listening sessions, that is all feeding into, ultimately into that, victory for 26, but also what we are trying to do for our party overall and for organizing in this state, which is for 28 and 30 and 32, we should be constantly figuring out how do we bring in new people into this process and then encourage them to stay, right? That is also what we need to do, that people can see themselves reflected in it. And that is part of our campaign, that we're not just going to suddenly, right, get religion before election day and show up at the black church the Sunday before, right? Or like hit the powwow trail, in August of 2026, but let folks see us, or go, to the local coffee shop in town, right? Trying to hustle before the end, but like our job is to show up now and then encourage people to be part of that process. So I'd welcome people to go to peggyflanagan.com to learn more about our campaign. You can sign up to volunteer. You can look for events and invite us in. If you want to do a kitchen table in your community, I'd love to be a part of it. But just this campaign is less about me and more about what it is that we're trying to build together for 26 and beyond.
No, thank you so much. And we'll talk offline because I'd absolutely love to have you up here for one of those kitchen tables.
Awesome.
I think it'd be excellent. And thank you so much. So sorry, Grace, that we kept her slightly longer than we promised. But it's been incredible. The comments in the live here have been absolutely great. Everybody has really seemed to like what you have to say, and we're really looking forward to the work you're doing going forward. So I'm going to be working with Peggy as much as she'll let me kind of tag along and bother her. We've got some other things planned up here coming up, so make sure you stay tuned. Go follow her in all of the places. And again, thank you so much for all the work you do and for giving us the time of day. It means a lot. And again, feeling heard. I'm a rural voter here in Minnesota, and so this is important. And I know a lot of rural voters here in Minnesota are joining us. And yeah, this is what we've been looking for and asking for, is this kind of access and engagement. And so you're doing something that's important to us, and I want you to know that. So thank you so much. All right.
Yep, Peggy, it's a really great pleasure. Really hope you're able to continue the progressive economic populism that I think you're preaching here, and hope that the American dream can succeed in the way you want it to.
Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Talk soon.
Sounds good.